And now I'm joined by Family Institute of Connecticut Action President Peter Wolfgang. He's a good friend of Catholic Vote. He is going to give us the confessions of a former globalist neoconservative. Is that right?
That is right. I was once a neocon, Stephen. Now the true story can be told.
What's going on right now, of course, is we've been talking a lot about Syria and about the airstrikes last week against President Bashar al-Assad and the prospects of what we might do next in the region of the Middle East. You have some extremely interesting thoughts on this. That's why I brought you on. Take the lead.
Well, Stephen, I come at this primarily from my role as a pro-family activist in the state of Connecticut. Most of what I work on is domestic, in fact, very intensely local. My main concerns, like those of Catholic Vote, are about the life issue. They're about religious liberty. They're about marriage and family and the protection of our faith here in this country. And it's from that perspective that I have experienced a turn on my foreign policy views over the years.
What on earth does that have to do with foreign policy, Peter?
I think it has everything to do with foreign policy. And, 15 years ago, I might have asked that question myself. When you think about where Catholics were at the turn of the century, if you're old enough to remember the Catholic zeitgeist in the late 1990s, it was very hopeful. We had this rock star pope who told us we were going to have the springtime of faith. The polls were moving in a pro-life direction. It was just going to be a matter of time before we got the judges to overturn Roe versus Wade. And there was this growing sense that we could remoralize the United States of America, that we Catholics in particular were going to take back all the ground that had been lost in our culture since the 1960s. We were going to take it all back.
Right. So let me stop you right there. Many of us entered political activism or political commentary around the time Obama took office. Really, a lot of our listeners and a lot of the people in my generation, what we've always been dealing with is really heated, dark culture war rhetoric that is more or less always on the defense, right? We're very worried about Barack Obama imposing various immoralities on us and attacking religious liberty, and that has sort of become the norm that we have to deal with. What a difference between that and what you just described in the late 90s. What happened?
Stephen, in 3 words, what happened was the Iraq War. And that's what these issues have to do with United States foreign policy. I'm a 48-year-old man. I was 30 in the year 2000. The world that I came of age of and the world that guys who are about 10 years younger than me or younger still are dealing with, the world that you just described, could not have been more different. I think the very reason why young Catholics today are talking about the Benedict option, which is a sort of strategic retreat from public engagement, or the idea that the United States itself is a so-called ill-founded republic, or Latin Mass traditionalism. All of this, the reason why young Catholics today are dealing with this is they're trying to make sense of growing up in a country that is increasingly hostile to their faith, that views their faith as a threat to the state itself. That could not be more different than the world we had 18 years ago. And why? The reason is that social conservatism was yoked to neoconservative interventionist foreign policy. And when one went down, the other went down with it. And so as we were building up to this bombing that President Trump just did in Syria, and look, in fairness to President Trump, according to news accounts, he chose the least aggressive of 3 military options that were presented to him. There's talk now of Arab nations forming some sort of force there in that area of Syria that was cleansed of ISIS. So in other words, no nation building. I hope he sticks to that.
Right.
But,
Nikki Haley doesn't sound like she's going to. But
that's it. And that's it. It always starts off simple and grows and grows and grows. And I think what we as Catholics have to think about is we really have to absorb the lessons of the first 18 years of the 21st century and ask ourselves, how beneficial has it been for the people that we advocate for the unborn child killed in the womb, for the child who doesn't get to grow up with a married mom and dad because of these adult agendas, for our own children that are growing up in a country that is hostile to their very faith. How good was it for us in those causes that we believe in and those people we advocate for to be yoked to this internationalist agenda that when it goes south, we go south with it? In fact, I think when the Iraq War went bad, social conservatives of the 3-legged stool of conservatism, we were the ones that suffered the brunt of it far more than economic libertarians or, ironically, foreign policy interventionists. It was our causes that completely collapsed to some degree.
Wow. I have never thought of that before, because you're basically saying whether Trump pursues a foreign policy that resembles George W. Bush's and to some degree Barack Obama's could directly affect the effectiveness of the pro-life movement and the anti-assisted suicide movement and any number of other social issues. All of those could suffer by association with globalist or neocon foreign policy initiatives by this White House.
I think we just went through it in your lifetime, Stephen. I think young Catholics your age and younger are growing up in these dark times precisely because we just made that mistake with the Iraq War. And I really think it behooves Catholics to rethink how we approach American foreign policy in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here at home and not get involved in these international quagmires that for some reason we're the ones that end up paying the biggest price for.
Yeah, well, us and Middle Eastern minorities.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yes.
And we should, in any case, be concerned for them because they're our fellow humans. They're innocent. They're the least of these whom Christ commanded us to treat as himself on pain of damnation. And many of them are our co-religionists. That's another aspect. So if you haven't thought about foreign policy very much, but you're a social conservatism, you might want to start thinking about foreign policy and taking a position on it that's in keeping with your faith and also in keeping with the lessons of the past 18 years of history. So that's really insightful stuff, Peter, really. Thank you very much again for coming on, and I look forward to having you on again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.